Podcast. I am Brian Morgenstern here with Sam Lyman. Huge week in Bitcoin. Many people are talking about it. Let's dive right in because this is maybe the biggest story Bitcoin related of the election cycle so far. What do you think?
Indeed, absolutely tremendous. So, Brian, you had a big week last week. You were all over the place, but most importantly, you in Mar-a-Lago, the one and only residence of Donald Trump, the former president, potentially the future president. And you had a meeting with him along with other Bitcoin mining executives where you guys successfully orange pilled him. I think this was a process that was months coming, but it was very clear last week that Trump has been orange pilled. He said as much in a statement. Do you mind pulling that up, Dylan? So this was a shortly after y'all met with him. He posted this on Truth Social. Vote for Trump. Bitcoin mining may be our last line of defense against the CBDC. Biden's hatred of Bitcoin only helps China, Russia, and other radical communists left. We want all the remaining Bitcoin to be made in the USA. It will help us be energy dominant. 3 exclamation points. Okay, that's a unambiguous statement. Brian, how did this happen?
We had been, us and others. It's not just us. There's some very wise voices in President Trump's ears who've been explaining what our business does, explaining how many voters care about these things. People are very keyed in on what a central bank digital currency is. They do not want it. I think it's a surveillance tool, which it is for the government. And people are really, coming around to Bitcoin like on a mainstream level. They're understanding that this is sort of a private sector alternative that can ensure privacy or pseudonymity. It's sound money. There's a supply cap, unlike our US dollars, that can be printed in abundance. There are a lot of great qualities to Bitcoin. And people are understanding this. So I think the president has seen polling data that has been coming out over the last many months. We've, been in touch with his team and making sure they understand that, how many people care about this, and that it is good policy combined with good politics. And so I think that this meeting was kind of a culmination of that. As for the tweet, I mean, it really does kind of encapsulate some of these important issues, explaining that the radical, not all Democrats, far from all, but really the more radical wing of the Democrat Party is on this full court press for a central bank digital currency because they want ultimate control over how we can spend our money. And they've been attacking Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the antithesis of it. So they've come after our bank accounts and gotten the regulators to tell banks to stop doing business with Bitcoin companies, which is insane, but they've been doing that. They tried to launch this survey to collect our energy bills and contracts so that they could then try to regulate us out of business by cutting off our electricity. I mean, this level of hostility is totally crazy. It really is on the far left. And it is angering a lot of swing voters. This just outright hostility to Bitcoin. President Trump sees that. He sees that it's a wedge issue. Nobody is going to vote for a candidate because they're anti-Bitcoin. But there are millions of Americans who would vote for a candidate because they're willing to embrace it and they want the technology to thrive here in America. We got that data to him. We had a chance to talk to President Trump about our businesses, how we are invigorating rural communities, because that's where these Bitcoin data centers generally exist. And we provide jobs to rural America. We're innovating on the energy piece. This is huge because President Trump wants energy dominance. He talks about this all the time. Well, Bitcoin miners use power when it's cheap and abundant, so they can help get new energy projects off the ground with a guaranteed customer. When there might not be any other demand in the market in a particular area, a Bitcoin miner will come in and buy the power when it's cheap and abundant. Then if you have a grid like, Texas, where they might have problems at peak demand, where everybody is using electricity at the same time when it's 100 degrees outside and they need air conditioning. Well, you might need users, big industrial companies, maybe like a Bitcoin miner, to be able to provide that power back into the market when people need it. And because Bitcoin is decentralized, it can do that. So not just the financial privacy piece, but also in helping to facilitate energy dominance. President Trump sees the value. He sees the voters there. He sees this wedge issue where he's right on the policy and he's right on the politics, and he can take independents and Democrats and Republicans, this coalition of people who like Bitcoin, and it has the potential to help him win the presidency. So it's very smart. It's a smart move by President Trump. The Democrats' hostility is confounding. And we think they're starting to realize, actually, because Congressman Ro Khanna from California is now trying to assemble a roundtable involving the Biden administration to talk about how to keep Bitcoin mining and how to keep some of these innovative companies in America. So they're starting to wake up because they see President Trump is winning on this issue, and it's not a close call. So the Democrats are starting to wake up and try to play catch up. It was an amazing meeting. President Trump is very smart on these issues. He talked about how he understands that, with certain people being debanked or deplatformed because of their political beliefs, he said, I totally understand why people are looking for an alternative like Bitcoin. He talked about the energy piece, about how, our companies can help with rural development and energy generation. He's very smart on these issues. He's up to speed. And it was a great meeting. And as evidenced by his perfect tweet after it. So, or Truth Social post, apologies. Yeah, really successful meeting. It's been a long time coming, many months of development, but it finally came to fruition this week. And I think it is a game changer for the industry and for the political landscape in America.
Absolutely. I was impressed by his post with how well he seemed to understand Bitcoin and how it works. The fact that he touched on the energy dominance piece, the fact that he touched on the CBDC piece, it's like he's been Bitcoining for his whole life, if you knew any better. So it was really fascinating to see just how much this resonated on the internet. I mean, that tweet alone made the rounds for days after the event itself. And Dylan, do you mind pulling up the next picture of Brian and Trump together? Okay, so I find this really interesting because, Brian, Trump himself. And I think a lot of people have a certain conception of him that is filtered through media. And if it's through MSNBC or CNN, they think he's spray tan Hitler.
Right.
So I would be curious to know, as someone who spent time with him last Tuesday and spent a lot of time with him when you worked at the White House, how does the public conception of Trump and your own private understanding and conception of Trump, how do those two things differ?
I think it was articulated quite well by Chamath from the All In podcast this week, because he got a chance to spend time with President Trump as well. They had a dinner at David Sachs's house, and his description of that interaction and how it sort of upended his conception of Trump as portrayed in the media is very consistent with my experience. And Chamath said that, he's very charming. He's incredibly funny. He's very sharp on these issues. And he's, some of the stories I remember in the Washington Post portraying him as this like screaming lunatic or whatever. I had never, ever experienced any of that. He has always been smart and charming and funny. Really just an interesting character of a guy, as we all know. So I was heartened to hear Chamath's description, because I think he's pretty much a lifelong Democrat, but who is coming around, to Trump's kind of view of the world, which, by the way, is not super partisan. Like, Trump has been a Democrat, he's been a Republican, he's kind of been all over the place. I think what contributes to his smarts, in addition to his wit and just great sense of humor, is the fact that he feverishly calls the smartest people on every topic. When I worked for him, he would come down to the Oval, oftentimes late morning, but he will have been on the phone for 6 hours talking to some of the best CEOs in the world, learning about what's going on in their industry. How can the US compete better? This is his thing. He's been talking about it since like the 80s and 90s, of how, the US is getting ripped off by China and other countries. I think that's always been his habit, is like talk to the smartest people about the important issues. And he learns a lot, and it just keeps him sharp, and it keeps him funny, and it keeps him interesting. So, yeah, I think Chamath's description is very consistent with my experience with Trump, which is totally different from how he's portrayed in the media. when I worked at the White House, it was fake news story after fake news story. I mean, this notion that he went to France and skipped a visit to a veteran cemetery because he called the veterans suckers and losers. Remember that was the Atlantic story. Yeah. I had the privilege of sending out the 27th eyewitness account saying that never happened.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's one egregious example, but there are many, many others. So yeah, I totally understand why he refers to certain outlets as fake news, because we experience that on a regular basis. Trump in the media versus Trump in person are two totally different things. And it was nice to have that experience again this week, get a chance to meet with him, bring a lot of our colleagues from the industry to meet with him. And it was really excellent. We're glad he understands our industry. We're glad he wants to be supportive and keep us in America, because the alternative so far, you know, I mean, best outcome is that Biden, the Democrats, wake up and realize that they should stop trying to move innovation out of America and stop trying to just relentlessly and gratuitously and nonsensically attack great American companies. It's crazy. Their behavior has been nuts. Best case is we have two pro-Bitcoin candidates running for president. So far, the alternative is we have one pro-Bitcoin candidate and one anti-Bitcoin candidate. It's not a close call. That's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that, because after Trump tweeted this out, this unambiguously pro-Bitcoin statement, somehow people found cause to complain about it. People were saying,
of course,
they were saying, oh, Trump wants all the remaining Bitcoin to be to be mined in the United States. That's a 51% attack on Bitcoin. As if people don't understand that Trump speaks in hyperbole, right? So I thought that was a funny attack. Other people were saying that, you know, Trump is lying. He's a politician. This is just what they do. Don't trust this man. It's like, okay, thank you for explaining to us how politics work. I mean, always people make campaign promises. Interestingly, Trump is actually pretty good at keeping them compared to other candidates. And then other people were saying that Bitcoin should not be something that's political, that we're dirtying Bitcoin by making it political. So all different ways of attacking what was, in my view, one of the biggest victories for the industry. What do you make, Brian, of everyone who found reason to complain about Trump's Truth Social post?
So, some people are not happy unless they're miserable. And so they just, it's always complain, always demand more, you know. Some people can't be helped. My view is that sometimes you should take yes for an answer. And so when we've been asking politicians for years, you know, stop attacking us, let us innovate. We're producing something that people like and appreciate and makes their lives better, helps make the economy stronger. You know, just kind of let us be. And if you're going to regulate us, maybe learn about our industry first. Stop regulating first and asking questions later. You know, just we haven't asked for anything other than fair treatment. And then finally, we get a candidate for president of the United States saying, I want your industry to thrive in America. It's time to pause and celebrate, like clap, like stop finding reasons to complain. That there's some, I think a piece of it is TDS. There is very strong Trump derangement syndrome. People who have been drinking the fire hose of negative press and have convinced themselves that the host of The Apprentice is a Russian spy and, you know, whatever else, it just cannot get over that hump and can't sort of deprogram and realize that he's not what they think he is. So there's Trump derangement syndrome is a piece. Another piece of it is, which I think is, some people, maybe it's a more fair reading. They've been in a defensive crouch for so long because of incumbent industries attacking Bitcoin that they like can't believe it. That like authority, some figures of authority are actually starting to come around and see the value in it. So that might be a bit of like, I don't know what you call it, PTSD or I don't know, rescue pet syndrome or something. That like they can't believe that someone would love them. So maybe that's a piece of it, but whatever it is, I would urge our friends to set those things aside and celebrate this moment because it's really, really great. And another thing that President Trump brought up that I think was a great point is that like his leadership on this issue is going to urge some Democrats to come around. They don't want to lose. No politician wants to lose. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, and they're seeing the reaction to what President Trump's saying, and they're saying, "Oh shoot, we are being left behind on this issue," and that's a great thing. We want everybody to come around, but he sees the gap and he's shooting through it, and good for him. Great politics, great policy for America, and the future's looking brighter. So everybody, wake up, stop complaining, celebrate this moment because it's the beginning of something really terrific.
Yeah, absolutely. And my take is this, Dylan, you mind pulling up that tweet? So people who are complaining about Trump's statement just need to recognize what the alternative is. On one hand, you have Joe Biden, who said that he's issued an executive order to limit or eliminate Bitcoin mining. In addition to that, his administration proposed a 30% excise tax on Bitcoin miners. So that's the alternative to Donald Trump, who has said he wants all remaining Bitcoin to be mined in the USA. People just need to accept that this is a victory. And just the fact that Trump came out with this statement and a few days later, as you mentioned earlier, Joe Biden is going to have a roundtable with Ro Khanna is a really good sign that this statement alone has moved the needle policy-wise. So that's been a really interesting development over the last week. And this has been a great year for Bitcoiners when it comes to politics. They're really starting to come into their own politically. For so many years before, Bitcoiners understandably eschewed politics. They stayed away from it. They recognize that politics is it's a rough business, and they a lot of times figure that Bitcoin was above politics. But Silicon Valley had that same posture towards DC throughout the 90s until eventually they realized that you have to deal with DC eventually. And so Bitcoiners are waking up to that fact. And I think one of the greatest signs of Bitcoiners achieving political consciousness is the Bitcoin Voter Project. So what is the Bitcoin Voter Project? Let's put it this way. Bitcoiners are masters of memetic warfare, but throughout their history, they have not had really the ability to organize politically until now. The Bitcoin Voter Project is a PAC, a political action committee that allows Bitcoiners from across the country to organize politically to really make a difference at the ballot box. And just last week, the Bitcoin Voter Project launched, and there's a great intro video that we're just going to watch 30 seconds of here.
Today, the American dream hangs in the balance. The US dollar has lost 25% of its value in the past 4 years alone, eroding the hard-earned savings of ordinary Americans. Soaring national debt and a struggling financial system demand the same kind of innovation that has made this country great. Bitcoin offers a safe, secure, and straightforward way to protect our wealth, make direct transactions without extra fees, and maintain control of our finances.
Bitcoin Voter Project, very important. So it's a 501c4 civic action and education organization. On Twitter at Bitcoin Voter, I believe it's the same username on Instagram, and you can go to bitcoinvoterproject.org to sign up. So the goal with this is we're going to educate people on the value of Bitcoin. We know a lot of people understand it, but a lot of people don't quite yet. And even the people who appreciate Bitcoin, we want to educate them on what are the key policy issues affecting this space, because we want to be able to activate voters when it comes to election time, or there's a heated policy debate in Washington, D.C. or in a state capital. We want to be able to have Bitcoiners call their representatives and senators and say, look, I see the value in Bitcoin. I'm investing in Bitcoin, or I work for a Bitcoin mining company or whatever else, and say either this policy is going to positively affect me or negatively affect me, and really try to push our elected representatives towards the right conclusions. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There have been relentless attacks from environmental groups or incumbent financial institutions or whatever it may be that are trying to mislead, and we need to counteract that. So the Bitcoin Voter Project is going to be really, really important. for all the Bitcoiners out there, go to bitcoinvoterproject.org, follow us on Twitter at BitcoinVoter, on Instagram at BitcoinVoter, because we are going to get Bitcoiners to the polls. And if things continue on this trajectory, Bitcoiners could sway this election. There's enough people holding Bitcoin in every swing state. Last election, it was 4 states, 80,000 voters across 4 states decided the election. If it's something like that again, Bitcoiners actually could decide this election. So politicians need to pay attention. It is, getting to crunch time, and we're going to make sure Bitcoin voters understand what to do when it comes time, to pull that lever at the ballot box or during a policy debate to call their representatives. We're going to make sure that they are equipped, that they have the right information, and that their energy is directed in the right direction, so that we can get better outcomes. Because these, the attacks on Bitcoin are not fair. It's bad policy. We're going to improve things. So we're taking the bull by the horns. We're launching the Bitcoin Voter Project. We're excited to do it, and encourage everybody to sign up.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think politicians are starting to get scared of Bitcoin and crypto money as well. Dylan, do you mind pulling up the Punchbowl story? So Punchbowl just did a good feature on the Bitcoin Voter Project. A few days after this, AOC tweeted, I think this was actually just yesterday, that she was really upset about the amount of money coming from Fairshake, which is another crypto PAC, that is being used to unseat one of her companions in the House of Representatives. And she's saying, this is too much money. What's going on here? It's like, well, you attack an industry like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, people aren't just going to lie down and take it. They're going to do something about it. And so that's what we're seeing with the Bitcoin Voter Project. Brian, I know you mentioned at one time you had a long-term vision of the Bitcoin Voter Project being like the NRA, but for Bitcoin. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, or Emily's List for Bitcoin, or Planned Parenthood for Bitcoin. The NRA on the right is very effective. Whenever there is a debate about firearm policy, gun ownership in America, they have tens of millions of members, and they're able to activate them. They're able to explain to them quickly and concisely, here's what's happening and here's what we need you to do. And they can have, thousands of letters and phone calls into those politicians' inboxes immediately. And that's what we want for Bitcoin, because we think it's an important enough issue. People's access to optionality with their finances, sound money, faster, cheaper, more secure transactions, all the energy benefits that come with Bitcoin mining. We want people to have that kind of influence in the process in America. That's what it's all about. That's what democracy is about, is being able to call your congressman or your state representative and explaining your point of view. Seeking the redress of grievances and freedom of speech. They're right there in the First Amendment. It's the first one for a reason. So we want to help Bitcoiners exercise those rights in ways that are productive and positive. Some of these groups that have grown into really forces of nature in the political process, we want to match that. We want to exceed that. So there are some very effective groups on the right and on the left, and we want to be. We really want Bitcoin to be for everybody, but we see some successful groups, that sort of have a partisan bent either way. We want to learn from what they've done, and then we want to do it better. So that's the objective with the Bitcoin Voter Project.
There you have it, everyone. Sign up for the Bitcoin Voter Project. This is such an important election year. As it stands right now, the presidential race is Trump versus Biden. But there's growing speculation that Biden may not continue through November as the candidate. And this speculation isn't without reason. There's been a lot of videos surfacing over the internet over the last couple months that show Biden just looking a lot older than he was in the last go around. He's starting to look like he's slowing down, that maybe mentally things aren't quite all there. It's sad to see a lot of these videos. And let's watch the most recent one. This is at an event at the White House where everyone around him is pretty jolly, having a good time, dancing to some music, but Biden just appears to freeze. Let's give that one a watch. But I think the guy next to him was helping him out. I think the White
So
House tried
awkward.
excuses saying, oh, the president, he just doesn't have rhythm, But no, I mean, there's not having rhythm and then there's freezing in place. So very strange. And then another video came out over the weekend where Biden has an event with Obama. They're on stage and Biden appears to freeze. Obama appears to sort of show him off the stage. Things are getting weirder and weirder every day. And Brian, what do you make of this? Do you think the speculation that Biden might be replaced is legitimate, or do you think this is just wild internet conspiracy?
Oh, it's just so uncomfortable to watch, and it makes me sad because I'm, an American, and I want our president to be strong and with it and sharp and represent our country well. So it's so uncomfortable to be watching these things. I have heard that from multiple pretty senior people. There's a procedure in place where if he were to try to gracefully step aside, they could, the Democratic Party has a procedure for replacing a nominee. So it's possible. I don't know if there's like a plan in place to do it. I know that they have rules in place to do it, so they could. And I know that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has been kind of running a shadow campaign for president. So I think he's trying to position himself for such a swap. I don't know if there's a actual plan in place. I can say that if there isn't, and that it is Trump versus Biden, and things proceed as they are now, I think it is sort of it's almost a race between Trump and Kamala Harris, where I think if the Republican apparatus is successful in branding Biden sort of, not up for the job, sort of incompetent at this point. Again, it's so sad. I hate to see this, but if they're successful in branding him as, in politics, the expression would be just an empty shirt. Then you're sort of running against the vice president because you're saying, he might not even make it through the term. Kamala Harris, is less popular than Biden, and he's got like Jimmy Carter level approval ratings right now. I think this all leads me to believe that if nothing material changes between now and election day, Trump and the Republicans are very well positioned to win a pretty decisive victory. So, which leads you back to, the Democratic Party apparatus. They believe Trump is the worst thing ever to happen to America. So, what do you do? So, if the question is like, could they and would they do a hot swap for their nominee? I don't leave it out of the realm of possibility. I don't claim to know, but I also just gaming it out. It's definitely possible, and they've got rules in place to do it. So, yikes! Some of the videos coming out, I think, make it more likely every day that they might do it. It's sort of a bad look, though. If you're the defenders of democracy, you let the primary process play out and you let the nomination get secured, and then you just backroom deal, doesn't add to the credibility of that on that issue. I'll put it that way. So who knows? What do you think? you think it's going to happen?
I don't think it's going to happen ultimately. I think they're going to pull a Dianne Feinstein play here. So this is how I see it. There's three people I think of in this situation, and all three of them came into politics in the same decade during the 70s. So there's two routes here. There's the Orrin Hatch route and the Dianne Feinstein route. And the question is, will the Biden team go the Feinstein route or the Orrin Hatch route? So Orrin Hatch, my former boss, he was the senior senator from Utah, served in Congress for 40 plus years. He was a legend both in Congress and back in Utah. Near the end of his term, he was getting older, and he had the wherewithal and the long-term vision to step down, because that's usually what you do. I mean, the American retirement age is, I think, 65, 67. That's when most people step down. But a lot of politicians will wait and wait and wait, and some of them will go until they die. And I don't think that's the route to go. It hurts both your personal legacy and the credibility of your staff and the work that you're doing. And so huge kudos to Orrin Hatch. Obviously, I'm biased, my former boss, but when he was nearing the end of his last term, he realized, you know what? I've had a great go. I'm going to step down and I'm going to ride off into the sunset. He endorsed the man who replaced him, Mitt Romney. And it was great for Senator Hatch's legacy. He was beloved in Utah and across the country. It was just the right move in every way. Then you have the opposite of what Orrin Hatch did, though, and that's the Dianne Feinstein route. That, at the end of her term, truly looked like elderly abuse to me, where Dianne Feinstein was being wheeled into the Senate, looking literally on the verge of death. And I don't mean that in a hyperbolic way. She looked so rough, and she'd been hospitalized for weeks, yet still her staff was pushing her to keep going. And you could see these videos of her staff whispering in her ear things to say at Senate hearings. And she had multiple senior moments where she had clearly just lost track of where she was, what time it was, what she was doing. And it was her staff behind her whispering in her ear like Grima Wormtongue to Theoden. It was a very disturbing look. And Dianne Feinstein ended up passing away in office. That whole time she could have stepped down and easily have been replaced by another much younger, much more competent because of age Democrat from the state of California. So there was no excuse to keep her there on the part of the Democratic Party. My concern is that that exact same playbook is happening right now with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, whether you're on the right or the left, you have to admit he's had a long and storied career. He's done a lot. You know, if I were his family, I'd say, Grandpa, we love you. It's time to step down, though. You've done so much, and it's better for both the party and the country if you just give this to the next person and if you pass the baton. But my worry is that's not going to happen, because the same power dynamic that was built up around Dianne Feinstein has now built up around Joe Biden, where you have a lot of staffers who recognize that their power, their influence in DC and across the country is directly tied to Joe Biden. There's this weird effect that happens in DC where staffers latch on to a host like parasites, and they will do everything they can to keep that host, that politician going, because they recognize that their career is tied to that person. And I think the discerning staffers will recognize when their boss has had their run, and it's better for their boss's legacy if they step down. But there's some more cynical staffers who don't recognize that, and they'll keep their boss going even when they've lost their faculties. That's my real concern right now, that that's what's going to happen with Biden. I don't have an inside view into the Democratic Party, but my sense is that there's a real civil war going on right now between those whose power is tied to Biden and those who are invested in the long-term interests of the Democratic Party. I think those two factions are probably going at it right now, and you can see it in small and subtle ways. A good example, actually, is this clip from Dr. Biden. Do you mind playing this clip for us, Dylan?
This election is most certainly not about age. Joe and that other guy are essentially the same age. Let's not be fooled. Joe isn't one of the most effective presidents of our lives in spite of his age, but because of it.
Yeah, that's next level gaslighting. To pretend that age is not an issue in this election is absolutely absurd. The fact that Joe Biden's own wife is pushing him to do this, to me, says that power structure around Biden himself is all bought in on keeping him going in this race. So my take, if I were a betting man, I would bet that Joe Biden's going to stay in this race unless there's this real health issue, in which case everything changes. But that's my take on it.
Yeah. So I want to unpack one thing that really, really critically important point that you make that I think a lot of people don't think about. And that is that power in our system is derived from a principle. And the old saying is personnel is policy. And so if your power is derived from Joe Biden's seat in the Oval Office, you're going to do whatever it takes to keep him there. And you don't, I mean, I think the people currently occupying the positions of power aren't necessarily thinking about the best interests of the country or the best interests of Joe Biden. They're thinking about, am I going to have the authority that I have today, tomorrow? And what do I have to do to keep that authority, that power? Keep his rear end in that seat. If you're a cabinet secretary, you're a staffer, you're whatever it is, and you're and you have a position of great influence, human nature, you want to maintain that influence. And so it is, it's unfortunate that to kind of think of it in those cynical terms, but that's the truth of how the government works, of how any bureaucracy works, really. So when you see people kind of defending or trying to talk you out of believing what you can see in front of your eyes, it becomes clearer why they're doing that when you consider what we just discussed. So something to keep in mind. But with that very lighthearted and optimistic topic, what do we have next?
Yeah, let's switch gears again to something more lighthearted, our grab bag section. Right.
Yeah.
You always have some fun, lighthearted topics to talk about with this way that we conclude our podcast. What do you got there?
Yeah. So this weekend was the US Open golf tournament. I used to be a pretty decent golfer. I'm not a very good golfer anymore, but I am a golf fan. And Bryson DeChambeau won an electric US Open. Rory McIlroy from Ireland missed 2 very short putts in the final 3 holes, which left an opening for Bryson to bring home the championship so that an American could win the US Open, which is great. And as part of his victory, he hit a 55-yard bunker shot, which pros will say is one of the hardest shots in golf. And he promised, with his celebration, he promised all the fans he was going to let them touch the trophy. He stayed at the course for hours with fans, walking the trophy around, shaking hands, thanking them for their support. And then long after the sun went down, it was pitch dark. There's a commentator who was trying, a hilarious looking guy with a big bushy mustache, was trying to recreate Bryson's tournament winning shot. And Bryson was trying to coach him on how to do it. And so this was hilarious and wholesome content. So can we just show a clip of the commentator with Bryson's coaching recreating the major championship winning shot? Dylan, do we have a clip of that? Here we go. So that's Bryson with the microphone, coaching the commentator with the golf club.
Oh, please go in. Get up there.
Boom. Almost exactly the same shot
Did I get it? Steve, how close?
that Bryson hit.
That mustache.
And he gives him the trophy.
Come on. Thank you.
It's like Mario and Luigi hitting the shot. So Bryson DeChambeau, over the course of his career, has had his ups and downs with kind of how he's portrayed in the media or how fans perceive him. And he, I think, safe to say, has completely righted the ship in that regard. He was a fan favorite this week. I was glued to this tournament. It was, the leaders were changing hole by hole. It was very exciting. The fans were totally into it. It was really a pretty incredible environment. So congratulations to Bryson DeChambeau for not just being able to do, but also teach and deliver, his electric shot, not once, but once himself and once by surrogate. So that's pretty fun content. So that is uplifting. An American won the US Open by a single stroke after hitting one of the hardest shots in golf. Very exciting.
Good stuff. Yeah. On my end, as far as a grab bag goes, I guess I just have a personal story. I was walking to the Hill and I walked by the NRSC and there's just tons of security there, Secret Service, Capitol Police. I'm like, what's going on here? And I see this guy who lives next to the NRSC. He's got a DC flag on his baseball cap. So he's very clearly a DC resident, right? And I say, who's coming to the NRSC? And he looks at me all nervous and he says, the ex-president. I'm like, you mean like Trump? He's like, yeah, Trump. I was like, what's going on here? Then I saw another clip where it was somebody campaigning for Biden, and the person says, and then the other guy whose name we aren't going to mention. It's like, at this point, it's he who must not be named. They're taking a play from the Harry Potter playbook, and they're afraid to say Trump's name, which again, I think gets to the TDS of the whole situation. People, as Brian mentioned earlier, this is the former host of The Apprentice, a guy who's been a Democrat, a Republican. He's not spray tan Hitler. And so I think a lot of people are still in that delusion that this guy is the second coming of Joseph Stalin, right? And that he's going to do terrible things for the country. All I can say to those people is turn off MSNBC, go outside and touch grass. Just relax. Everything's going to be okay. If it's Trump, I personally think things will be better for America. But even if it's Biden, the world's not going to come to an end. People don't get so involved in politics that it becomes your religion. But I just thought that was a funny anecdote from my week last week. Who's coming? The ex-president.
Oh my gosh. Chill out, everybody. Unclench for a second and get outside and breathe the fresh air. Get some vitamin D and spend time with your friends and family. Yeah, that's good advice. Politics is important. These policy issues are important. War and peace are important. Life and death are important. But if you start worshiping politicians, I think you're heading down the wrong path. Also, they just want support. So, like, if you disagree with them, like, talk to them and try to persuade them. Don't just, screech and rend your clothes like a lunatic. Good advice, sound advice to close out the podcast. Be healthy, love your family, get some sun, and have a good week. Follow us on Twitter at MorganSternNJ, at SamLyman33, and follow the Bitcoin Voter Project at Bitcoin Voter on social media and at BitcoinVoterProject.org. And send us some feedback if you like what you saw or you don't like what you saw or you have questions. Hit us up. We'll be happy to talk to you. And we'll see you next time on the Peer-to-Peer Policy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.